Our town council to order. Thank you everyone for being here. It was a little dicey for a while there. We didn't have power in the building till noon or just after noon, I think it was. So we weren't sure. We were just kind of kept telling council, like at 9 o'clock we'll make the call, maybe at 10 o'clock we'll make the call, but I'm glad we waited because it's always easier to meet on the regular time. There is an addition to the agenda. So we don't have one of our delegations. So Ashton Rodenizer isn't able to make it today. She is still without power, and so she's taking care of her home and her family. So that is the better place to be. So she's not here as a delegation, but I do want to add Afterglow under Business Arising because there is a request, as we know, Afterglow is happening at the end of this month, and so there is a request for in-kind donation for some street closures and banners and power. So we'll go over that under Business Arising. So that'll be added, and we'll refresh your e-scribe that will appear. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none. Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Councillor Pugere, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Announcements. I guess I'll start with the obvious, which is a thank you to all our public works crews, engineering staff, fire department, police department, Nova Scotia Power, all our crews that were out from the beginning of Saturday prepping. I went out for a few hours with Sergeant Ramey in the middle of the storm to take a look at what was happening. I'm unbelievably amazed at how the town bounced back, because when I was out, I was scared of what the morning was going to look like. The water, I'd never seen water so high. The bottom of Silver's Hill, the water was so deep. I was grateful that we were in the police SUV, because I'm not sure that the regular police cruisers would have gone through that. You could see it Sunday morning, the amount of mud that was over the road. There were ducks swimming in the Shipyards Landing parking lot up near the street, like full-on paddling, feet not touching the bottom. That's how much the water rose. But an hour later, as the tide started going out, it was amazing how quickly it went away. Also, some of the newer pieces of infrastructure that we did. So the draining at the drain work at Kinsman Field after the Craft Challenge. When we drove by, even though the baseball diamond was underwater, that end of the track was dry, which was amazing to me. And some of the other culverts and things that we've had improvements done and that staff have been out doing held up beautifully. But I cannot say enough. I cannot give enough thanks to our staff that were out there in the wind, in the rain. I don't know how many calls came in just in the 2 hours I was out for the fire department, especially for water in the basement, which is something we're going to have to address later, because that's probably in most cases something the fire department shouldn't be doing if it's not going to impact, if it's just a little bit of water and there's not a risk to electrical. It's probably not the best use of their resources, but we'll probably bring the fire chief in to explain how we should address that. But overall, most people in town were 24 hours or 36 hours without power. All things considered, that's pretty good. I know there are some people still without power. We hope that their power will be restored soon. And a few businesses that did have water damage, I know that some won't be open for a few days, and we hope that they'll bounce back soon. And as locals, we'll support their business and get them back on their feet. And of course, our hearts go to Petite Riviere General Store and their fire that happened in the middle of the night this morning. And again, I know our Bridgewater Fire Department was down there with a ladder truck in the middle of the night. So thank you to them. Any other announcements for anything upcoming? Councillor Graves.
Yeah, the United Way, in partnership with the Salvation Army, has a program called Coats for Kids at the Bridgewater Mall. And all you do is you bring a gently used warm winter coat, hang it on the appropriate hangers or coat rack, and then working with our community partners will ensure that the right folks get the warm winter coats. So we're looking for coats, boots, and mittens. Last year was our first year of the project, and we gave away 850 warm winter coats. We're expecting more for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McGinnis?
Yes, the South Shore Junior A Lumberjacks home opener is this Friday night, the 13th, 7 o'clock, at the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center.
Perfect, thank you. And before I forget, if anyone is watching, if you need a warm shower, the LCLC is still open for that. So during regular hours, they'll be open. Councillor Thorburn?
Yeah, there's Bridgewater Museum. Actually, there's change of hours of operation, and it's open year-round, and actually the price is free. It's open to the public weekly from Tuesday to Saturday, 1 to 5, closed on Sundays and Mondays from September the 1st through to May the 31st. And you can make arrangements for special events by appointment. Now, on the 14th, presentations on murder by historian Peter Reichel, Lunenburg County Murderous Past. A look at some of the murders that have taken place in our county over the past 200 years, as well as some well-known and other hidden, $5 per person. On the 7th, Thursday the 19th, open reception for an exhibit, Inner Harbors and Open Seas. Artwork by local artist Wesley Lowe. Refreshments served. Open September the 15th to October the 12th. The artist Walk and Talk is on Saturday, September 28th at 2 p.m. And on 21st of September at 2 p.m., a free watercolor workshop. Have you ever used watercolors to paint a picture? Come and have a chance to try your hand at this style of painting with the museum staff. Admission free.
Perfect, thank you. Any other announcements from members of council? No? Okay. We don't generally read any more of the proclamations, but we do have a proclamation that's on the town's Facebook page that September is Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Awareness Month, and specifically September 9th, which is today. Now it's time for delegations, and I see we have Faye here from Immigrant Services Association Nova Scotia. So she's going to give a presentation on what that means.
I'll just share this with you. I know you probably got a few in your packages, so forgive me for handing them around in front of your screen. I know some of you had met me with some of my volunteer work already, but this time around I'm coming to speak with you with regard to Immigrant Services Association, and in partnership with the Nova Scotia Office of Immigration and the ACOA Foundation, so the Atlantic Canadian Opportunities Group. They have actually put together a pilot project, which I'm a part of, and that is to help local entrepreneurs and businesses and those individuals that are making economic growth in our area to hire and fill positions for jobs that we can't find Canadians to fill. So basically, we're looking at helping out with the Atlantic Canadian Immigration Pilot Project, and also workplace culture programs, and also assisting individuals that are already placed here in integrating into the community. As we know, it's not just the recruitment of individuals into positions that we can't get Canadians to fill, but it's also retaining them in our community. So making that community vibrant and diverse and assisting them in doing that. So yourselves as councillors to our town council are not only members and constituents that are reaching out to you, our employers, but you're also employers yourselves. So in assisting the employers, my particular role is onboarding employer engager. So I deal with the employer specifically, but we do have an office in Halifax that deals with immigrants that are coming in. So we're not stepping on anyone's toes because there's wide reach available that are dealing with immigrants that are already in the community and assisting them in landing positions and whatnot, but we work in collaboration with them. We're not taking jobs away from Canadians. This is positions that can't be filled. Either they do not want to fill them here or they cannot fill them here, and that's often things like truck drivers, food service workers, tradespeople. HVAC is something that's coming up a lot in Bridgewater here, as well as those nurses and doctors that we're working through Halifax to try and fill those positions. So we're reaching out to you to let you know that we exist, and even if you don't remember anything that I tell you in this little bit of a presentation, just remember that we're out there and available to work with you. If you have any questions or concerns, if anyone you know in your constituent group is able to express to you a need, if they aren't able to fill it with a Canadian individual or they've been having having difficulty getting a full-time position filled, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to link them up. One of the more innovative programs we have right now is called a skills match. So we take individuals that we know have language skills already, have their qualifications and credentials that have already been approved, are on a database that the employer can log into and register with, and basically search out individuals that fill their needs. We also will post it for them if they have a position. We are looking for any information or any sharing that we can do for you. So we often will put together a package or a program that's specific to clients that you already have, or employers that you already have, or employees, pardon me. So if you have an employee that's struggling with a workplace communications issue, it's not just for dealing with, hello, how are you, where's the washroom, when you're learning a language skill. Sometimes it's about what type of tool you need, how to engage the individuals that you're working with, how to engage your clients and ask those questions, how to write an email. So we'll actually set up a program that's a 12 to 14 week program on the employer's time, 1 to 3 hours a week, where you can actually work with them and go through the skills that are specific to what a wrench is in English versus what it is in Arabic. So we have clients and individuals and employers that are all gaining and growing from this. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to make this more viable and vibrant community by ensuring that the employers have the workforce they need to grow, and hoping that you can share the message for us. So that's all I have to add to you today, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Perfect, thank you. But we didn't even need the clock. No, this is new. Questions for Faye? Deputy Mayor.
Faye, at the start of your presentation, you talked about retaining them in our retaining them in our community.
Yes.
And I've heard a few stories where the employer has spent a fair amount of money training and recruiting and so on with the candidate, but then after a period of several months, that candidate then moves on to a larger metropolis like Toronto, as an example, typically because of cultural, groups there, so to speak, that they affiliate with perhaps more. And what can we do to keep them in the community? Like, what tools are at our disposal for keeping them here and retaining them here?
So I mentioned workplace culture. So we have a couple webinars. We also have an individual that will come out to the area, and he's coming to Bridgewater to speak with the Community Sector Council. He's doing a workshop with them, but he'll also come and speak to any organization. And what it is talking about your present employees that you have now, and ensuring that they understand they may be dealing with someone of another culture, that sometimes the language, the terminology we use, the slang that we use may mean different things in different locations, and just so that we have a common awareness of how to move forward and how to communicate with them and to make a better workplace before we have any conflict or issues that may come up. The recruitment and retention piece is very challenging because most often we're looking for employers that have 2 years already in business, in good standing, that they've indicated a need that they haven't been able to fill for the last month. But to bring someone in and to do that recruitment process is very paper intensive. So one of the things I can do is assist them with the paper process. It's going through immigration services to get the work permit put into place. And usually it's about a year in that people decide that they're going to leave and move on. Now we have the Scotia Multicultural Association, which I've been working with, as well as St. Mary's University. I've been sitting on a committee with them, trying to have those individuals that already have training here in Canada and bringing them out to the South Shore to meet with individuals and companies here so that we can keep them. But part of that is it's an onus upon the employer to make a welcoming environment. Right. It's to ensure that they're met at the airport, that they have accommodation, that they can travel to the workplace. I'm dealing with some locations out in Caledonia, in Greenfield, and places where there's just not apartment buildings. It's finding rooms or accommodation and introducing them to the Multicultural Association, making sure as an employer you're supporting those types of groups that we have here on the South Shore so that it welcomes everyone. They recently had a barbecue that we didn't have a great attendance at, but we're hoping to look at other projects. One we have going on right now with the South Shore Multicultural Association is dealing with new people in the community and their barriers to recreation. So talking to them about what they'd like to participate in and how they're finding it a challenge, and doing it through a photo voice program. So that's going to be coming up at the Des Brisets on the 28th, if you know any individuals that might like to participate. But there's also some great programs. They're often run through Halifax, because I'm the only person representing ISANS from here to Digby. But we often will link in with Y-Reach, Social or Multicultural. And I think if a lot of employers knew that and could direct their newcomers and their staff towards that location, whether or not they're immigrants, to have them involved in the Social Multicultural Association is just such a vibrant, elegant way to express the diversity of our communities. So having those individuals brought forward and being aware of those places that they could reach out to other people and find out what challenges they've had, how they've overcome them, is really a good step forward. But it is still an onus on the employer to take that chance. So for some of my employers that I've dealt with in other locations on the South Shore, they're bringing people in from Brazil and overseas, and they're just in Iraq and places like this, and they're saying to me, even a year's worth of service is better than nothing. So
Sure.
for the paperwork and the challenge, once you get registered and are familiar with it, even if your employer leaves after a year, which hopefully they won't, we want to encourage them to stay in the community, make this a diverse community. And if perhaps they do go, if it's that value and it's worth it for you to keep them here for a year, because that's when they can apply for residency,
Right.
then most often they'll stay at least a year with the organization. We hope longer. We would really encourage working with employers to do that.
Other questions from members of council? Councillor Thorburn?
Just one, how long does it take from the start of the process to the end? Because I was talking to a firefighter, and he's trying to get so that he can work. He's been sponsored here. He's going on to 2 years, and he can't legally work here. And now, the other day, he told me he has to fly back to England to get his photo taken, get his passport done there. He can't get it done in Halifax. He has to go back to England, get it done, send it in, then come back again. So,
The typical process, I know the individual
You know.
that you're
Yeah.
dealing with. I think I encouraged them to come to Canada before I started with ISANS. Unfortunately, their paperwork wasn't completed, and their original sponsor stepped out of the process, and they had to start it over again, and they required paperwork going through. They didn't come through our group
No.
at the beginning of things, unfortunately. They are dealing with some other community organizations here that are helping them and settling them up into the process. As an example, one of the projects that we have with ISANS is if you have an individual who has a registration for a body, say social working, engineers, there's a loan and a fund that you can access through ISANS that will assist that individual, that immigrant coming in, having their credentials recognized, because we know that's a lot of the problems. We often hear, and believe me, having lived in Toronto, there's enough taxi drivers that are driving taxi and have fabulous doctorates in other fields, but just can't work in those. So this fund will assist that individual in getting that recognition. Unfortunately, the firefighter that you and I know hadn't gone through that process, has already been dealing with that here, and has changed their sponsors due to some extenuating circumstances.
so
But as an example, if I could just finish up with that, their wife is a social worker with 2 master's degrees, and was told by the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers that she couldn't work here, that her 13 years of dealing with children in murderous situations was not acceptable. And she's challenging it, but in the meantime, she's working in a field similar to, but not in her credential recognition. So she's struggling with that as well. Unfortunately, we're looking at the regulatory bodies that are dealing with that, and there is a working group trying to associate it with, the medical fields. Right now, what we're doing with doctors is trying to put them into the working medical environment so that they at least get jobs in phlebology or somewhere in the hospital, so that they're learning the terminology that's used in that Nova Scotia health environment, that they're engaged in that community, so they get to know people, they get mentoring and partnerships that they can deal with while they're getting their credentials assessed and reviewed, which I think is going to help us retain individuals that are reaching out to our medical and doctor-related services that we need. But I apologize, Councillor, please, you had another question.
no, under the process that you're dealing with.
Oh, yes.
How long does it take from start to finish, from the time you apply to you have a worker here?
So for those that have an employee, that they're already registered and have an employee waiting, it's usually 1 to 2 months. If you're starting from ground zero and just getting registered, we expect it's going to be about 8 months. So this is not an easy or quick process, but if you get registered and you are looking at your capacity for the future, as an example, one of our firms out in Liverpool is presently working with 75 to 100 employees, and they're looking at hiring 50 more in the next year. And it's our new legalized environment. And have spoken with them, worked with their HR, have them registered, and they're finding people here in Canada that can fill the positions, but there's some other specialty ones, like aquaculture specialists from Scotland, that they're looking at hiring to deal with their specific organic process that they're going to be working with. So they're already registered. So they're anticipating that growth, and they're anticipating dealing with it. So they've got a bit of the paperwork behind them, and it will not take the full 8 months. Okay. The hang-up tends to be between the provincial and federal governments, with NSOI, which is the Nova Scotia Office of Immigration, and Immigration Services Federal. And I've been working with our MP's office, and we, often will chase up files that have become negligent, as example, the firefighter we talked about. So there's a couple avenues that we can reach out and get information and at least get the right paperwork in order. But if we can, it's usually 8 months. We've had quicker, had a couple a little longer, but they usually had glitches in the processing of the paperwork, whether they weren't signed or completed appropriately. Yeah.
Any other questions from members of council?
Well, thank you again for your time and letting me speak to you about this. And again, if you remember nothing other than the fact that we have somebody in town, please pass them along. Happy to chat with anyone and help them out as we can go. And thank you for your time.
We know how to reach you. Thanks, Faye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to come as a delegation before council? No, seeing none. Or as I mentioned, our other delegation isn't here, so we'll go down to minutes. We have the minutes of July 23rd special council meeting and the August 12th regular council meeting. Any errors or omissions there? Hearing none, we'll deem those minutes as approved, and we'll go down to planning items. And we have a public hearing for the application to amend the municipal planning strategy in historic downtown C1 zone. And all the statutory requirements have been met, and agenda is circulated. And so we'll turn this over to Ms. Childs, who will run us through the presentation.
Perfect, thank you. So staff received an application on May 29th from Black Seal Properties requesting a policy change for the historic downtown commercial zone, or the C1 zone. And so these amendments are for the entire C1 zone rather than any specific developments. And any future developments by development agreement in the C1 zone would be subject to these amendments. So the historic downtown commercial zone is outlined there in pink, and it includes retail, professional, and service-related businesses, as well as some residential properties. It's adjacent to the downtown residential, institutional, restricted commercial, and park zones, with some high-density residential nearby. And the applicant is looking for a policy change to the historic downtown commercial zone to enable flexibility in height and flexibility of the urban design requirements for developments that would be completed through the development agreement process. There would be no changes to the as-of-right or site plan approval processes or permissions with this. And just to outline the developments that trigger a development agreement, in the C1 zone are new as-of-right development, except multi-unit, that exceed 465 meters square. New multi-unit residential development exceeding 465 meters square with commercial on the ground floor. New multi-unit residential development exceeding 3 units on all streets except for King Street. And new lounge and beverage rooms or additions to existing ones. So the current policy in the municipal planning strategy regarding height in the C1 zone states that multi-unit residential with commercial on the ground floor that are located on arterial and collector streets can be up to 3 stories mid-block or 5 stories on the corner. And that multi-unit residential with no commercial on any street other than King Street can be up to 5 stories. And so, for example, King Street is only 3 stories except on the corners right now, since it's on an arterial, or since it is an arterial street. And the policies that would need to be amended to accommodate the requested changes are policy CDA 6 and CDA 8 in the municipal planning strategy. So the proposed amendments would remove height restrictions from the policy and would in turn bring King Street up to the same permissions that exist elsewhere in the zone right now. So there would be no restrictions in the zone, but determining the appropriate height would happen during the development agreement process. And as for the urban design requirements, some examples of these that we regulate are setbacks from property lines, orientation of buildings, locations of entryways and windows, and facades. And the land use bylaw states that the urban design requirements must be adhered to by all new development abutting King Street in the C1 zone. But the MPS states that they must be adhered to by all development subject to development agreement, and that includes those located outside of King Street as well. So it doesn't line up with the bylaw, and so this would be cleared up with the amendments. And the policies that would need to be changed are CDA 1, 2, 6, and 8. And the proposed amendments would replace an adherence with a strong consideration for the development agreement process. So this would also allow staff to strongly consider urban design requirements outside of King Street, even if they aren't required to be adhered to. And the land use bylaw contains zoning standards for each zone, and those detail things like height and setback requirements. And although in a development agreement they're not required to be adhered to already, they would be used as guidelines. So out of the 15 objective statements that guide the municipal planning strategy, there are 10 that are applicable to this application, and they focus on compatibility, compact development, walkability, enabling a full range of housing, that built form is designed well, and also that history is preserved, and these are supported with the amendments. And commercial and residential policies in the municipal planning strategy have been met, and they focus on mixing uses, attractive commercial uses, housing options, and residential densification. And the downtown and waterfront master plan supports a vibrant, diverse community through increasing density with redevelopment, that buildings on King Street should be a minimum of 2 or 3 stories, that the existing rhythm of the facade should be maintained, and also that historic preservation should be balanced with new development. A public participation meeting was held on June 25th here in council chambers. 10 members of the public attended, and concerns and support were both received through email. So some concerns were focused on the addition of tall buildings, but it was stated that policy still promotes developments at an appropriate scale. The design of new buildings and additions to historic buildings, what those might look like. And it was stated that urban design requirements, although would not necessarily be adhered to, would still be strongly considered and would also be strongly considered in the entire C1 zone. And there were concerns about parking. And it was stated that parking is included in the land use bylaw, and this would be considered during the development agreement process for specific developments. So it's recommended that council give second and final consideration to the amendments to the municipal planning strategy for the historic downtown commercial zone. And if this were to be passed, amendments would then be reviewed by the provincial director of planning. They have 30 days to review it, and the notice of amendments would be published in the paper.
Great, thank you. Questions from members of council? We've kind of gone through this a few times.
Yep.
Quite straightforward.
Would you like to have a motion, Your Worship?
No, I think we have to go through all the.
We do. Oh,
Got my
okay,
little
I'm
sheet
sorry.
here. But save that. I'll come back to you. Does the developer have anything to add? Any kind of presentation? Any remarks to make? No? Okay. Any comments from members of the public that are here? No? We don't have to hold everybody back, but glad to see some here, so that's great. Closing remarks by the chairman. All I'll say is I appreciate the flexibility of council and the openness of council and staff when someone comes with a proposal or an idea, that it gets its fair shake and it gets to have staff review it with an open mind, and they prepare documents that are clear and articulate those to the public through their public participation meeting and to council. And I wish more communities would be as flexible and open to changes, because in a province that is screaming for new residents and development to grow our population, this is one of the tools we have at our disposal. So, if there's no questions or comments from council, I would entertain a motion, please.
Yes, Your Worship. I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration to the amendments to the municipal planning strategy is contained in Appendix A of document 19-074B for the historic downtown commercial (C1) zone.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Vergier. Any further discussion?
Just a comment that it's, from my point of view, long overdue. I think the existing conditions were too restrictive, and if we're going to make this town grow, we best do some more stuff like this.
Agreed. Any further questions? Are you ready for the question?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is correspondence for information from Reverend Simon Davies from Holy Trinity Anglican Church regarding South Shore in Motion. I think a few of us have received some concerns from members of the public regarding specifically the burnouts, not just the noise, but the air quality issues that does present. I know I received a few phone calls from people that had to actually leave their home and go outside of town to a hotel because they already had breathing problems and this exasperated those, and so they felt they had to leave. So this is formal correspondence from someone to council, so that's before you, and information for the public.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes.
Is it possible to invite South Shore Motion to a meeting to discuss the event a bit further?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can do that. It's probably something we should have done maybe a few years ago, because we have received concerns over the last number of years. So yes, we will make those arrangements, and we'll have them come before council. Thank you. Our next item is under reports and recommendations. We do not have Angela here from Remo. She was going to give us a presentation. Angela needs to sleep. She has had a very busy weekend, and she should be at home, not here.
First week on the job, or?
Yes, it really is like her second week, I think, on the job.
Couple weeks.
Couple
yeah.
weeks. So great coordination from Remo, but she should be at home. So the next item is the notice of proposed remuneration revisions, policy 64, annual remuneration. I've been practicing that word all day, so I don't get remuneration, so I don't get tongue-tied. See, I didn't even get it right.
We knew what you meant.
Adjustment for council members. So this is just giving notice that this will come to a future meeting?
Yeah, we come to the September 24th council meeting for
Okay.
consideration.
Perfect. Does someone want to make a motion and put that on the floor for discussion? Councillor McDonald?
Move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give notice pursuant to Section 48 of the Municipal Government Act that at the September 23rd, 2019 council meeting, amendments to Policy 64 annual remuneration, now you got me. I should have practiced. Adjustment, council members will be considered to provide for additional remuneration compensation for Smart Cities engagements. I got it wrong twice in one motion.
We're going to get another chance in a minute. I got a seconder, please. Second by Deputy Mayor Tanner. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. There is a second motion underneath that one. If someone else. Yeah. Last chance. Councilor Dormer.
Okay. I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater direct staff to commence the review of council remuneration in accordance with the requirements of Policy 64 and in advance of the 2020 municipal election.
Seconded by Councillor Graves. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next is another notice of proposed designated funds policy. I kind of like these notices. I don't remember ever doing these before you came along. No? But I kind of like giving people the heads up that these are coming.
Yeah.
So if someone is prepared to put that on the floor. Councillor Frazier?
Yes, Your Worship, that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give notice pursuant to Section 48 of the Municipal Government Act that at the September 23rd, 2019, the proposed designated community project funds policy will be considered to enable community nonprofit organizations to apply to Town Council for fundraising purposes.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McDonald. And again, I'll just reiterate that we're not passing motions to change things. We're giving notice that we are going to have this discussion at the next council meeting. I just didn't want any confusion where people think we're having motions put on the floor and passed and we're changing policy without having a fair public debate. So again, this is just bringing these forward so the public knows that there's going to be a change or potential change in policy. We've had a mover and secondary. You have a question, Councilor?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
No.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is the CNR Bridge rail and deck repairs. we know that we have some work to do on this bridge. Did you want to
Sure,
bring
I'll
that
just-
forward?
So council had received a presentation from the ATV Association back in the spring with respects to looking at enabling a portion of the trail within the town boundary to be multi-use. And at that time, council had several questions for the association, and they went away with a little bit of homework to do, and we're going to come back to council and address those questions. And council directed that we defer the work that was to be done on the trail bridge to enable some time for the ATV Association to address those concerns of council. And the reasoning for that is because the work done may need to be modified if council opted at some point in time to consider the request. And you wanted to ensure that you didn't kind of spend that money just to have to spend new money to do something different. So we haven't received that presentation from the ATV Association addressing council's questions. I believe we've had a few inquiries into them, but we haven't got an idea or an indication of when they'll be back. This memo is basically telling council that the time has come for this year in terms of our ability to get the work done within the fiscal year, within the season that remains for construction. So if we don't move now, we will have to defer, or we're recommending that you would defer until next year. That will give the ATV Association a little bit more time to come back to council, and staff feel that they can continue to maintain the trail bridge this year. I think Larry did note in his report that if council does decide to permit ATV access on the trail on a regular basis, there could be changes in the design, and the work that we do now may just have to be redone under a different design. So we want to continue with the trail as it is now and get the work done this year. He's saying we have to move. If not, we defer until next year and give a little bit more time for that decision to be made once you receive the information you requested.
I guess I have two questions. The first is, are there any safety concerns by delaying the work that was supposed to be done this year to next year? So that's the first question. The second is, if we are going to defer, does that mean we have now increased maintenance costs this year versus just getting the work done right away? So welcome, Justin. Pull the microphone over. Those are the two that I have. No pressure.
Just on your first question there, we will continue to maintain it to make sure it's safe until the time that it is upgraded. So deferring it won't have any impact. We will continue to replace boards and make it safe to the public. Your second question?
Is there an increased cost of maintenance because it's, obviously it needs repair, and we're not repairing it, we're just kind of business as usual?
I think it would be minimal, honestly. Like just the upkeep of it would be only till the next budget year, so it's not a long ways away. I haven't physically walked it, but staff is telling me that they feel comfortable in deferring this till the next budget year with no concerns.
Okay. I like how you kind of no concerns. Sorry. Questions from council, Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, I know in this year's budget, I think it was 55,000 put in for doing some upgrades into that, and that will get carried forward until next year. But is that price going to increase because we've delayed it a year? It seems to me that price was for this year. There would be some cost increases if it's held over for another year.
I'd say there's always a risk, but it's a small.
And then you got the other risk too. If you do choose to upgrade it for the ATV use, and what you've done, you've basically wasted it because it might have to be all ripped up and redone again.
That's not my question. My question was, would the price increase when we're not doing the work this year? Because any project that I've been involved with, if you don't do it when you schedule it and you postpone it for an indefinite period of time, the price escalates. So that was my question, not that you're going to do it or not do it.
Well, as the CAO said, there is a risk.
Yeah,
So
I would think there would be,
happen,
yeah.
Just the cost of materials.
Yeah.
So-
It could go down too, we don't
Well-
know.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
I assume if we didn't have the request from the ATV Association, this work would go ahead, or are we dealing with a shortage of available staff to deal with the project?
No, if we didn't wait for the ATV Association, the work probably would have been done by now.
Okay.
So we just kind of put on the back burner, and now's the time to decide whether we're gonna pull the trigger or wait till the next budget year.
So I guess my second question, it's more of a statement, I guess, how long is too long to wait for the ATV Association to get back to us with what I thought was relatively simple request for information?
Well, I guess that's why we're here today. So if
Okay.
the answer to your question is
We waited long
now,
enough?
then it's, the motion would be to commence the work. I think Councillor McGinnis was first.
I hate to bring this topic up. We own that trestle bridge, I presume.
Yes, that's correct.
Has that ever been looked at for its stability and safety?
Yes, it was looked at, I'm gonna guess here, I think, I believe it was 2012,
Okay.
by an engineer, and at that time it was acceptable conditions. Now, it's soon time again, I believe we're working on a proposal now to reassess it again, just based on, it's been many years, just to go over once again.
Okay.
And obviously, if they do allow the ATVs, it'll have to be looked at a different standard, because
Yeah.
now it's a walking bridge.
Yeah,
now.
that's why I brought it up, yeah.
Councillor Bashir.
I was just confirming that we didn't have a date for when the ATV Association were coming back, so that's undetermined.
We don't have a date. Have we even received a reply? I know we've made a number of inquiries
Okay.
for the information we've asked for.
The last I heard was early June, that they were meeting, and we've not heard anything since.
Okay.
I just have a correction, it was
Yes.
looked at in 2014.
Okay, thank you. But bringing that up does raise your answer, which is the right answer, brings up another concern, which is if engineering work has to be done to the bridge to bring it to a different standard in order to allow ATVs, that cost should be borne by the ATV Association, not the residents of Bridgewater. And so, if council is going to, if council chooses to defer rather than go ahead, then I think we should reconfirm with the ATV Association that funding is going to have to be in place. Other questions from members of council?
Ready for the motion?
Yeah, I mean, you have the recommendation here. You can choose to use that one, or you can choose to proceed. It's up to you.
Okay, I'll make that motion then.
Sure.
I would move that town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the town engineer and defer this construction of the CNR bridge rail and deck repairs to the 2020-21 fiscal year and approve the carry forward to the 2020-21 fiscal budget year.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Graves, any further discussion?
Yeah, no, I'll let it go.
Question?
Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. So I think it's fair that if we inform the ATV Association that we've put off these repairs to the next budget year, but we're going to need an answer, and I would ask that perhaps engineering provide a date that they would like this work to commence. The money's in the budget, so.
I guess I'd also suggest that if that bridge is going to need structural enhancements to it to allow ATVs to cross it, then we should know what that dollar figure is to then relay that to the ATV Association, because it literally may be out of the realm of possibility.
Well, and yes, and in all fairness to them, because if they come back and say, yes, we'd like to do this and work with you, and then we find out it's $1 million, then we may have wasted their time and ours. So, yeah, in fairness to them, for sure. Good, thank you. Next item is a sponsorship request, Raising Sales Summit in Chester, requesting a sponsorship amount of $500.
So we have a fund, the council has a fund that was established in the 2019-20 budget. It's your former fund where you had funding for the Regional Economic Development authority, and we indicated that we would use those funds when regional opportunities came up and related to economic development. So the Raising Sales Summit is one that I believe the Chamber of Commerce and Chester initiated, and it kind of took on its own life, and it's an annual event where businesses from all over the South Shore region and Lunenburg County in particular come together, and it's essentially a conference for businesses, and it's well attended. The town is being asked for a sponsorship, and you will receive, if the sponsorship is granted, they have a sponsorship package, of course, so depending on how much you give, that will kind of dictate what you get, but you'll be able to have 2 complimentary registrations for the $500, an exhibitor's table, and the town's brand and the conference website, and being acknowledged during the conference itself.
Questions? Councilor Graves?
More a comment, this event is in 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the marketing, I'm sure, has already been done in terms of the Facebook promotions and printing. So I guess my comment is, I have no problem supporting it, but it's a little bit late. The request is a little bit late, and I understand we got the request in August 12th.
Yeah.
But, something like this, when they're dealing particularly with councils, it should be considerably earlier, so we can get the best value for that $500.
Well, and especially in consideration that most councils take a couple of weeks off in August.
Yeah.
ODL takes more than that, so it's just the schedules.
Yeah.
No, fair.
I know this is the second year, but they should just be aware that when planning, they should be planning ahead.
We can let them know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor McDonald,
I
thank you.
move the town council for the town of Bridgewater approve sponsorship in the amount of $500 for the 2019 Raising Sales Summit to be paid for by funds previously allocated to economic development in the 2019-2020 Administration Department budget.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. Any further discussion?
Just clarifying, we're sending staff for this?
If you, I suspect there may be one staff member that
Okay.
attends, but if there's council representatives that want to attend, that's fine too.
Okay.
I mean, we should have a bit of a game plan for this. Bridgewater's open for business, aerial shots of what we've got available for land. I mean, this is a face-to-face great opportunity to showcase what we've got available in Bridgewater, so.
Yeah, especially if we sent someone from planning who would have that kind of information, but that's up to, obviously, the director to allocate staff for that, or our communications person,
Mhm.
somebody. It would be nice to have someone who can represent the town and actually answer questions, because good point from the deputy mayor, that if someone says, do you have land for sale? It'd be good if we had somebody that says, yes, and here it is, and this is what it is, and this is what you can do, or this is what you can't do.
Hmm.
So, but we'll leave that to the,
Yeah.
to the CAO to work with her staff on that one. Does that work for everybody? I already clicked to the next one. Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I was all excited about buying a hybrid vehicle. Skip that. Our next item is RFP 2019-09, which was for a 2019 or newer fuel-efficient / hybrid vehicle. Is this replacing the Dodge Caliber that still
Yes, that's
is
correct.
kicking around? That
Yes,
is.
yeah.
Lest anyone think that we go through vehicles too quickly, we have a number of very old vehicles. I believe one of them is older than my daughter, who's a teenager now. I think that GMC Envoy must be.
Oh, that was replaced.
Oh, was it?
2
We did
years
that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I still see it around.
Well, what year is the Caliber? That's gotta be a 2000, isn't it?
It's old.
2007.
There you go.
Long time.
Almost.
And we bought it used.
It's almost a teenager.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, talk about stretching the dollar. So there was a tender that went out for fuel efficient or hybrid vehicles, and what came back was for a Hyundai Ioniq. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Any questions?
I think this is great.
We'll put the motion on the floor, then I just want to.
I move,
Yeah.
you want the motion? Sorry. I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and award RFP 2019-09-2019 or 2019 or newer fuel-efficient hybrid vehicle to a Regan South Shore Hyundai for the purchase of the 2020 Hyundai Ioniq at a total price of $30,012.70, including HST and 96-month extended warranty, $27,216.56, including net HST.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. This will be our second hybrid. Nice to start working towards greening our fleet. Just going to say this for staff as we go forward, if we want to start greening our fleet, especially when we want to go to electric vehicles at some point. This is a passion of mine, and I did do some research that when we do start the time when we're going to tender for electric vehicles, we have to start factoring in the ownership cost of those. It's not just the purchase price, because they cannot compete on purchase price alone. They'll always be more expensive. But to level the playing field, you have to go through the operating costs. But that, of course, would include the infrastructure that we would have to add. So it does have to balance.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of working towards greening our fleet, especially through all we're doing with Energized Bridgewater. So this is a good step forward.
Yeah, love it.
Good plug to remind people, we had the first municipal hybrid vehicle in the province with that Ford Escape many, many years ago. So this is our second. Motion's on the floor. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is our strategic priorities update. And I'll just pass that to our CAO for
So this is your update with respect to the strategic priorities that council passed at the beginning of the calendar year, and that accompanied your budget and business plan for this fiscal year. So if you remember, we have our priorities divided into now, which are more time sensitive, and then next, and then we have ongoing and departmental actions too. So just a quick update, I guess, highlighting some key things for you. Under the sanitary storm water strategy, which is really cost of service study, that's where we're looking at our sewer rates and how those get calculated. Is it an area rate? Is it based on consumption, water in, water out, those types of things. We did have a draft report, and we're expecting the end of this month. So we should have something coming to council very shortly on that, to look at what our new rate scheme could be based on the direction that council gave in the past for the study to be done. The Exit 12 agreements, probably more of an in-camera discussion, but we have gone through, I've sat down with the staff at the District of Lunenburg and looked at all of the agreements that we have regarding the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center and Exit 12, and we basically narrowed it down to a few key clauses that still remain outstanding. There's things that are no longer relevant, so we can get rid of a lot of things too as well. So the next step is to really have some of those discussions, and those are, as I say, be more of an in-camera conversation that we'd have to have. In terms of the LCLC, Nistadia has started. They started July 22nd, I believe, was their first day. And the first board meeting with having a report from Nistadia will be September 19th, I believe. And we are also looking at now how we can integrate our programming on a regional basis, working with LCLC, and I suspect Nistadia will have some good recommendations with respects to that as well. Business Park, I think everybody's aware of that, so I don't really need to say too much about that, just that work is well underway. The Bridgewater Memorial Arena, we have engaged the Acadia Entrepreneurship Center to undertake the feasibility study, so work has started on that. You've got your update already on the community energy CEIP, stands for Community
Energy
Investment Plan, thank you. And the commercial phase-in tax bylaw, you received a report last week on that as well, so staff have a little bit more work to do there. The Awesome Bridgewater Index, probably wondering where that one's at, and it's been on the list for a bit. So staff have been looking at that. We sat down not too long ago. Leon did a little bit of exploration in terms of how it could actually be used as a way to measure some of our smart cities work that we're doing. So it could be a good forum for that. Okay. And so we should be bringing something forward to you, I believe, in September. The end of September is what we're looking at, September 23rd. And the town master plan study, we did do a presentation to council, I believe in June, where we talked about your stormwater, or wastewater master plan that you had done. We were looking at our stormwater and sanitary sewer and some of the capacity issues that we had and aligning that with our planning policy. So you got a good picture of where what we allow for development might not necessarily match what the capacity is of the system. And we kind of left it for food for thought, but we will have to bring that back and get some direction from council shortly so that we know what direction you want to go with that, if any. Capital cost recovery bylaw, that's really with the Public Service Commission, but just to let you know that we had a bunch of work done on that to look at how we could develop a bylaw that would enable recovery of costs by the developer when they're doing development to ensure it didn't impact our ratepayers. That was probably over a year ago, and we've kind of taken a step back. We got an update from them, and we'll be going to the PSC to talk to them about here's kind of what was done. Do we want to proceed down this road and continue doing this work? The Accessibility Committee, we have all our members in place, and I believe our first meeting is the next week to start looking at how we're going to move forward and develop our accessibility plan. If you look at the funding applications on the next page, you'll see that we've been quite successful this year at grants, and staff have done a lot of hard work at making grant applications and receiving some fairly significant grants for the town. So that's a really good news story there, I think, in terms of what we have. And we've highlighted those for you there. In terms of recruitment, the assistant engineer position has been vacant for some time on your org chart. So September is the month that I indicated that we want to start looking at the recruitment for that. So we should have that position filled hopefully in the next couple months is my hope. Vacation banks were March 31st, 2020 is the deadline for that. So that if you remember, we mentioned that we had a large bank of vacation days because they just kept getting carried over. So staff have been asked to bring them down to a reasonable limit, and if at the end of March 31st, 2020, we'll look at options to remove that liability from our books as we move forward. During the month of July, we had our building inspection MOU implemented, so we had inspectors from another municipality come in and provide that backup support, and I think that went really well. I haven't received any concerns from anyone with respects to seeing someone new doing the inspection. They were probably just happy that we were able to continue delivering that service during that period of time. So we have that in place, and we can call on that as we need it, which is good. And I think that's probably about it in terms of highlights for the report, but there are some other items in here. If council has any questions on them. On the page after the report, you'll see that I have a revised chart. So this is intended to kind of show you what's come off, what we've done, and what based on conversations that council's had or direction council's given, would be put in. And I've made some adjustments to that, and those are shown in red. So the LCLC governance and transition piece, our main part's done. We'll be looking at the transition, but I've moved that down to next. Because it's going to be a little bit of time before we get that done. The phase-in of commercial tax bylaw, we had that, I believe, as a next, and we've moved that up to a now, meaning that you've given some direction for some work to get done immediately to bring back to council. You've discussed the noise bylaw and your desire to see that put in place, so put that in. Put it in under next, because it's not time sensitive. There's no urgency to it unless you want it to be. And then we can move it up to the now. And then we've added solid waste bylaw communications, because we're going to be starting the new solid waste collection contract April 1st, 2020. But there are changes that we have to make to the bylaw to reflect the increased service level and changes that we've made. And we need to start communicating that, and we're going to start that after the fall cleanup, because we're going to be moving to the bi-weekly bulky collection April 1st, 2020, and no more cleanups. So we're going to have to be strategic about how we do that, but that's going to be a big piece for Patrick. And the bylaw piece will be coming to council for consideration as well. And then you can see that we've added the field house lease and the small world lease into planning and recreation. And finance is added in the year-end audit, happens every year, but it's a big piece of what they do. The internal control audit that council's asked for will start in November of this year, so that's, finance is gonna be busy working with the auditors on that. And the budget document, we're looking at revamping that a little bit for council, so that's something that finance is working on as well. So those are the changes to the strategic priorities based on, some directions that's been given to by council. If there's anything that you wish to see added to it or something on here that you wish to have removed, we can have that discussion. If you're happy with it, then I would just be looking for confirmation from council that this meets your intent.
Great. Questions from council? I really appreciate the update and the detail with it. And seems we're on the right track, unless anyone has anything to add. No, the silence tells me that we're all happy, I think, right now. It's nice to have a plan that we can follow. One that's manageable and doable, so that's great. Good. Our next item is the evaluation of the property assessed clean energy or PACE financing programs, and in there is a recommendation to reduce the financing ceiling from $300,000 to $100,000. Turn that over to our Director of Planning.
Thank you. So,
Community Development, sorry.
That's right. I forget myself. That's okay. So in February of 2017, when the PACE program was brought in and when we, council entered into the contract with the Clean Foundation, at that time, the motion from February 2017 was to enter into a 5-year contract with Clean to deliver the PACE program and to establish a $300,000 a year ceiling subject to annual review. And earlier this year, the Clean Foundation actually came to council in April to talk about the Clean Net Zero program that it had been partnering with the town on since 2018, and that was sort of became a second component to the property assessed clean energy financing, or the PACE program. And so in April of this year, there was recommendation to maintain that $300,000 ceiling and extend some of the financing options that the town has to the Clean Net Zero program participants. And all of that was subject to this annual review and an overall evaluation of the Clean Net Zero program and a hard look at our clean energy financing program, what we refer to in the office as the base PACE program. And so this report that Greg Gupko submitted to you for tonight's consideration sort of does that, provides that deeper evaluation of both of those programs, and makes a recommendation that we reduce the financing ceiling, so from that $300,000 down to $100,000. And so the Clean Foundation has been administering our base PACE, the Clean Energy Financing Program, since 2016, 2017, and it supports energy retrofits in resident houses with a 1-to-1 cost savings ratio, savings to debt ratio. So for every dollar you spend on energy efficiency, it has to model or suggest that you'll have $1 in savings. And it's financed through the town. The town has raised its interest rate to go along with prime. So it started at 4%, now it's 4.18% as of the spring 2018 debenture rate. There was a strong uptake, but we've never passed the $100,000 financing mark in any of the years that we've been offering our PACE program to date. So then side by side to our clean energy financing is the Clean Net Zero program, which was a 2-year pilot program administered by Clean, which is now complete. All program participants received a comprehensive report that identified how you could, as a homeowner, get to net zero, so either reducing your energy dramatically and producing some energy as well. And that program really aimed to support deeper energy retrofits, but there was a lot of challenges with it. I think sort of the overall message from that is it's really hard and very expensive to retrofit an old house to be net zero. Sort of the overall finding there. So there's some sort of recommendations around how to continue to support moving to net zero, but the motion in front of you really has to do with what we do with our own PACE program, and that's the recommendation here. But just briefly, the Clean Foundation has been excellent from a homeowner and a town staff perspective in delivering our program for us. The PACE mechanism, I think we've seen, and through this deeper evaluation, the PACE mechanism really works, and it's one that we're continuing to explore as options to improve, how can we improve upon the program, and how can we look at this program and this funding mechanism for our smart cities and energy poverty reduction work as well. So there's a lot of lessons learned and some potential solutions that have been identified through this report, and there will be more sort of, as we look to grow sort of the PACE concept through smart cities, we'll be doing it very cautiously and with a lot of look at how our program functions here. But overall, we are recommending that we reduce the PACE ceiling. It just sort of reduces some of our liability in terms of how much we're sort of exposing ourselves to how much debt we might be incurring by loaning that out. But we don't foresee an issue of reaching that ceiling at this point in time.
Makes sense. Questions, Councillor Graves?
But if you did have citizens from the town of Bridgewater that really became engaged and wanted to do their houses, and it went up to 150 as an example, or 175, yeah. Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
It's not a bad thing, yeah. No.
So I'm just wondering, if we keep it, if nobody's really using it, and there isn't, and I'm not saying there's not promotion, but if there's not a huge uptake on it, but if for some reason a couple of people talk, they're at the pub, they talk and say, this is really good, and they engage with the town to have it done, have the upgrades done to their homes, and it exceeds the $100,000, then let them go at it, right? So what I'm getting at, if they're not using it now, then fine, and if they happen to use it, then all the power to them. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, don't change it.
I guess there was, I did hear the director mention our risk or our liability, so there is always that. If they do $300,000 worth of work, they have to pay for that $300,000 worth of work. So that is a large number. Granted, if you're doing $300,000 worth of work, you probably have a house that's worth significantly more and hopefully are able to afford your costs. But
there's lots of rules and conditions for the program.
Yeah, true.
Part of the reason for the recommendation too is just to enable, to leave that greater borrowing room available to use it in a more dedicated way for the energy poverty reduction program that's coming forward. So it's not taking it away from, it's just kind of redirecting, I guess, some of that room that we've identified, we have within our budget for PACE programming to go towards supporting the energy poverty reduction work, while maintaining a third of that for the regular home, our base PACE program. So that's sort of part of the rationale that's contained in the report.
Deputy Mayor.
So to Michael's point, if we reduce it to 100,000 and we suddenly have this huge uptake or some uptake, what mechanism do we have to allow for another, I don't know, whatever it might be, 50,000 or 75,000, to allow that capacity relatively quickly to accommodate the people that are going to?
We'd come back here.
So it could be turned around relatively quickly.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Ready for the motion?
Sure.
Okay, Your Worship. I would move that Town Council of the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and reduce the PACE program financing ceiling to $100,000 for the fiscal year 2019-20, as outlined in document 19-118.
Seconded by Councilor Frazier. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Business arising unfinished business, we have proposed on-call pay policy, personnel policy and procedures manual 5.7.
All right, so council did give themselves notice that you would be considering this policy change at this meeting. And what this essentially does is, I guess, bring parity amongst the union and non-unionized staff when it comes to on-call provisions. So essentially right now, when we renegotiate the collective agreement, on-call compensation was $250 per week. And what we have for non-union is it ranges. It can go from, I believe we have it here, it varies quite a bit in terms of the rates. Some of them are a little bit more than that, and there are a lot that are less than that. And what we're doing is bringing that, as I say, to be equal, to be $250 per week. The budget implications, we already planned for this, so the total budget increase for 2019-20 would be $7,011, right down to the dollar. As I say, we included that in the 19-20 budget, anticipating that this change would occur. So what would be in order if council agreed with the policy change is to approve the policy, section 5.7 on-call compensation policy.
Questions from members of council? Councillor Thorburn.
I like that idea, Tim. I think it's fairer to our employees and treats them pretty much all as equal. And I think it's good for staff and it's good for morale if everybody working together is getting the same rate instead of 3 different various rates.
Yeah.
Well done.
It's tough sitting by the phone waiting for
Yeah.
the phone to ring, right?
Mhm.
You kind of put your life on hold, so
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Graves.
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the on-call pay policy, personal policies, procedures manual, section 5.7 as presented in document 19-085 as policy for the town effective immediately.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is the added item Afterglow Art Festival, which, by the way, is happening on the 27th and 28th of September. It's Friday and Saturday. Fantastic annual event. Draws a lot of people to our community. And as I said, Ashton Rodenizer was going to be here to give us a presentation, but because of the storm and not having power, being at home is the much wiser thing to do and take care of family. But there is a request that council needs to address tonight. Because the event is at the end of September, we can't really push this decision and ask her to come back in a couple of weeks and delay that. That is to deal with in-kind contribution towards a road closure. The request is to close the road from Empire Street to Dufferin, including the Old Bridge.
Her request was to close it from Empire to Old Bridge Street.
But staff are recommending
Staff are
differently.
recommending against that simply because trucks end up coming down and they can't go across the bridge, so you essentially have to barricade it off at Dufferin. So staff are saying that the road would have to close from Empire to Dufferin so that the trucks wouldn't come down to Old Bridge, and that also means that you'd have to close Old Bridge off to La Have so trucks didn't come up Old Bridge and try to get across the bridge either, because they can't maneuver that. So that road closure actually increases what I believe she had envisioned the street closure to be 1,500. Talking to Larry, it would increase it to 2,700, an additional 1,200. And then banners of 425 to have those erected by staff, and access to power at 500. So the in-kind is 3,625.
Councillor McGuinness.
We received a request through grants to organizations
Yes.
early this year, and I believe, and I'm going to rely upon Cheryl's memory here as opposed to mine, that we did give them at least $2,000, I think $2,500.
Correct.
As a grant.
Yes, 2,500.
So this will be in addition to that.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
And what time of day do the road closures happen?
They're at night, I believe.
They're both, it's two different No, that was my question. It is a Friday and Saturday night event, so my assumption was that we would close the roads Friday and Saturday, but in the past, this Friday event has been smaller. Does it require the road closure?
My understanding is just one night.
Just the
I'm
Saturday.
not sure which night it is, to be
Be
honest.
Saturday.
So it would be the Saturday.
Be Saturday.
So I guess, just picking Cleves as an example, you know, if you're closing at LaHave, how does that affect them? They can, I guess, people can go in through the mall parking lot and come
I think in the
around
past,
and walk.
we've closed it at the beginning of the old bridge, have we not? So that they
Yeah.
can go into Cleves and the
Oh,
mall.
okay.
My understanding is we close it as the same thing, as we do for Canada Day, we double barricade it, so local traffic can go to the TD and
Okay.
Cleves.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
At the crossroads. Yeah.
The next question I have, do we have anything in the budget for this, and where would it come from?
I believe engineering does have an amount that is in there for in-kind. I don't know if Larry went over that budget number with you?
No,
No,
I don't
no.
know.
But that, we do account for some expense to do with in-kind when we exceed, because we do things up to $500 per event and it doesn't have to come to council, so this is over that.
So there's three pieces to this. The road closure piece is $2,700. Then there's banners, $425.
Which is labor cost,
Right.
yeah.
And power, so like to access power, that's $500. So I just wanted to reiterate those three things in case. The road closure thing is what we have to, for sure, I'd like to deal with all of these tonight, but for sure we have to address the road closure. Because without the road closure, then that impacts the event. Councillor Graves.
It's a great event, brings lots of people in town. It's good for the town, gives people something to do. I just wish that the same consideration could be given to Christmas on LaHave and Canada Day in terms of road closures and the costs associated with putting on the events. For this particular event, I do support it because I think it brings a good group of people. It's going to bring people to our restaurants, going to bring people to our bars, and for that reason I support it. But I think consideration should be given to Canada Day and Christmas on LaHave. Some of the costs are $8,000 to $9,000 for those events, town costs.
I'd just like to echo Councillor Graves' comments, because the major part of our budget for Christmas on LaHave is for everything from policing to road closures and that type of thing. Whereas I know the exhibition, we do that, I think, on a free basis, and we're probably going to do this, which we should, and I support it. But we should be looking at also Canada Day and the Christmas on LaHave, because we won't raise money to pay the town.
Well, and I was just going to say that the next item we have is the social exhibition grant request, and in there, we have to demonstrate in-kind support, and one of the things we demonstrate is $2,500 worth of in-kind for road closures.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure it's higher than that.
and I'm sure it is, and there's other items in there, but to your point, Councillor Graves, we're doing it for other events, but not really one of our flagship town
Yeah,
events.
two flagship events, right?
Yeah.
Bring in a lot of people.
Yeah. So, if it is the will of council, I would be seeking a motion to approve an in-kind contribution of $3,625 for the road closures, banners, and power for Afterglow. Or, if you would rather, a motion seeking approval for $2,700 for the road closures for Afterglow, and then we can deal with the other two items separately. It's up to council.
Well, the banners add to the event. The banners, it's a good advertising tool. It looks good in town. It should be included, at least.
So the 500 was for power?
Yes, correct.
What is that 500 for? Like the power?
It's, that's what she's allocated in terms of in-kind support to, I guess, compensate for the use of power. I believe they use the town center parking lot, the farmer's market is in control of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they would have to work out an arrangement with them for
okay.
compensation of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah.
So, but that's really less,
also
like,
have to-
that could be less, right? So would it be that the farmer's market, who does pay the electrical bill if they came to us and said they'd added $75 to our bill, it wouldn't necessarily be $500, it could be
Yeah.
Like, we're not, if it's in-kind support, we're not writing a $500 check to Afterglow, right?
No.
We're writing it, we're doing in-kind. So again, if it added $100 worth of power, it's not $500, it's up to $500, I guess.
It's what it is, yeah.
Can't imagine they're using $500 worth of power in one day.
So in a motion, will we use an amount or just that we're providing in-kind services for the 3 services that she's looking for?
We have an amount here of $3,625. I'd like to.
You can
I'd
do
like
up to.
Up to, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's wise to keep to $1
Right.
amount. It's important for our taxpayers to know where their money's going, and also I think it's important for the group to know. If you refresh your e-scribe, you'll get the motion is now there in front of you. I will add that this does seem last minute, but because of August and just the way the schedules worked, we didn't necessarily just get this today. I just wanted to reiterate.
So help me with the total. We've given them a grant for how much?
$2,500.
Plus,
This would be
This
another
is, yeah.
$3,625.
okay.
6,000.
Oh, clarify, the road closure would be from Empire Street to Dufferin Street, including
Oh,
Old Bridge.
And that would also include the detour. We have to detour the trucks around the loop, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's more signs and.
Right, yes, thank you. Councilor McDonald?
Are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, we put a motion on the floor, continue to discuss it.
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater provide in-kind donation of $3,625, including road closure, banner installation, and power costs for the Afterglow Art Festival.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor Graves? Further discussion? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
Just a comment, I guess. I mean, I think it's a great event, to echo the earlier comments. I think it brings a lot of people to the downtown. I think it's really disappointing, honestly, that 7% of their income is coming from community support, or 11% from community support. Like, that's a fraction of $6,000 that they can't seem to generate from local business or other in-kind support or whatever the case may be. If I'm reading the numbers correctly, like, it's a shame that they can't raise more locally for such an event that brings all these people into downtown Bridgewater. Yeah, just a comment.
Well, when you look at well, no, I'll echo that. When you look at their income, so 77% is Heritage Canada, so that is government funding. 7% on top of that is other government funding.
I'm colorblind, so maybe I'm getting my colors mixed up.
5% of that is town of Bridgewater. So, your 89% of your funding is government funding. That is a large percentage. Now, I'll just repeat what everyone else says. It's a fantastic event, brings thousands of people to our downtown core. It's what we want in our downtown core. But we want to be partners. Government should be partners. That means there should be more players. So hopefully, when businesses have all those people downtown in front of their business and they're selling lots of stuff, that they jump in and support this great event.
Agreed.
Further comment, Councillor Thorburn?
Yeah, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, we talked about July the 1st and Christmas on the Have, and we really haven't done anything, but we've been given in-kind services to other services in the town of Bridgewater, and I think that has to be flagged in their budgets, and we have to discuss it because it's important at budget time that money's allotted by the police department and the engineering department or public works for those funds to show up there. It should be all treated the same, as far as I'm concerned.
Councillor McDonald?
Again, fantastic event and one of a kind in the community, something we didn't have, and we desperately heard people crying for it.
Yeah.
So I definitely support it and hope that it continues in our community. I think the investment we're making is a reasonable investment for the size and nature of the event. I'd love to see our investment continue to go down as it's proven itself. I think the business community has seen it prove itself for a number of years now, and hopefully they'll get on board and start helping with the event to make sure it stays. But I think this is a reasonable investment for this type of event.
Thank you. Councillor Graves?
That way, it takes a while, it takes a long time to raise money, to go out to the business community. I did that for Canada Day, and, you know, it was a little bit frustrating to raise money for Canada Day to give it back to the town for a road closure, right?
Yeah, understandable. And in terms of raising money, I believe Ashton is doing this mostly by herself.
Yeah, I think
That's
so too.
a lot of work for one person to do, especially when you have other things on the go. So, I mean, that is, so maybe that's a great time to call for other people to help her with this event. Yeah. Any other discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And just a reminder to the public, that's September 27th and 28th on King Street. So hopefully it'll be great weather for that. Thank you. Great discussion. Our next item under new business is 2020 South Shore Exhibition Canadian Heritage Grant Municipal Support. So as I mentioned in the previous item, in order to apply for this grant, they need to demonstrate in-kind support from a municipal partner, and that's us. And so we do provide $11,000 of in-kind support to the exhibition. And so that is what is in the letter that's going to Heritage Canada. And so we need to make that official. Councillor McDonald.
Did we not provide them a grant to help with, I think it was like resurfacing one of their rings?
A few years ago.
I think a
Couple-
few years
a
ago.
few years
Maybe we
ago
could
we
even
did.
make mention of
Yeah.
that there's been town contributions. I don't know if that
Um,
helps them at all, but
I think it has to be demonstrated in the current year.
current year,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Just have a question, but I know the motion isn't on the floor, but should there be a monetary value in the motion? Or
So it'd be the 11,000 in
Yeah.
kind, you mean? Oh,
Yeah.
and put it right in the motion?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Sure, there's no harm. So just to add, it would be that Town Council, Town of
Mhm.
Bridgewater authorize the CAO to provide confirmation of in-kind support. 11,000, you got it? Okay.
Yeah.
You're quick.
Mhm.
Right, so if you refresh your screen, it'll be there. Someone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater authorize the CAO to provide confirmation of $11,000 in-kind support for the 2020 South Shore Exhibition's grant application to Heritage Canada.
Thank you, seconded by Councilor Vergier. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our last item is application for flying flag under policy 81, Emergency Health Services Medic Monday, which is September 30th. So there's a request to fly the flag on the special purpose flagpole, which is located at Shipyard's Landing. If someone was prepared to make that motion. Councilor Vergier, I think.
Yes, Your Worship, that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approved the application for flying the Emergency Health Services flag as per Policy 81, flag flying on the designated special purpose flagpole located at Shipyard's Landing on Medic Monday, September 30th, 2019.
Thank you, seconded by Councilor McDonald. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. That is the end of our meeting. Just again, thank you to all our crews, staff,
Click on
first
votes.
responders that
Turn that,
helped during Hurricane Dorian.
Just click on the word. Oh, yes.
The town bounced back quite quickly, and we cannot thank you enough for the hard work you've done. I hope you're resting at home, and much deserved rest. Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I use the PD.
Little twitch.